Okay, back to the important matters or the other.
Damien, you said we had some things to talk about when it came to acquisitions and maybe breaking up this team. I wanted to hear your thoughts.
So to be clear, James, you said you'd make the move right now. You and I want to make sure I got this framed right. If you you'd be willing to take the step back right now to take a leap, as you say, forward later.
Yeah, because I think what you're doing right now is you're taking a step back in chemistry to take a step forward. But that again, it would really depend if I knew all of the the conversations behind the scenes. If I knew exactly what my odds were of bringing Harrison Barnes back on, or even extending Harrison Barnes. But like if you knew what it was that you could do and how long it would, how much money it would take, and whether it's a 30% chance or 72% chance that you can bring him back, whatever it might be, then like if I had all of the numbers in front of me and I knew exactly what it was, I would really consider it, because I think right now you're giving yourself enough leeway, like enough time to make it work, to let the pieces simmer in the pot and kind of come out the other side. And Corey Spiteri brings up in the chatty house a really good point, that that the Kings and the Hawks already have a transaction on the books, and the Kings, as of right now, they owe the Hawks a 2014, 2024 first round pick that's it's top 14 protected. Then in 25, it's top 12 and top 10 protected in 2026. Right? Well, maybe you could take protections off. So as opposed to the Kings having to give up a whole bunch of extra, draft capital, maybe they can already work with the capital that they already have that's owed to the Hawks. So, I mean, I think you're going to have to give up something of value as far as draft capital if you were to do something crazy like just a straight up Harrison Barnes and, Alex Len for John Collins. You're probably going to have to throw in a first round pick, but maybe you can get away with pulling a protection off the 2024 pick and then freeing up all your other draft picks in case you need them down the road, or a 2024 pick and say a couple of second rounders. I don't think it would cost you.
I don't like that either. And then I would also ask the question, James, because I see you working, but if I go to Atlanta and Wes Wilcox or, and Monty go to those guys and say, look, man, we're giving you a starter for, one of the best offenses in the league. What we got to give up more for? Like, what you need picks for? Where are you going to get that from? Where else you going to get a starter, on one of the top teams without us? Why we got to give you a pick and all this other stuff?
Yeah, because you've had, and this is where I get stuck, James. You've put this dude's name out there. You signed him to an extension and then immediately said he was on the trading block.
Yeah.
Like those things don't get out, as well as anybody. Those things don't get out there on accident. You don't even want him. So you can't negotiate with me. That's where I get stuck. Is like they clearly don't want John Collins there, so you can't negotiate with me.
Well, here's what my response would be. First of all, he's 25 versus a 30-year-old Harrison Barnes. Secondly, he's under contract for this year and 3 more, as opposed to just year for this year for Harrison Barnes.
Though? Are we positive that's a good thing?
Right. The Hawks don't want nobody under contract.
Well, no, the Hawks. The problem the Hawks have is that they've got 2 max money players, and they've got a big time player and a big money player in their center. They still have Bogdanovich for a couple more years. Like they have a lot of money tied up here, and that's usually the problem. And they have DeAndre Hunter coming up for extension, and so they have to pay other players. And again, if you're the Kings and you have to worry about that as well. There's going to come a point where you're going to have to pay Domantas Sabonis 2 years from now, and you're going to have 4 years from now, you're going to have to pay De'Aaron Fox more money. And so you're hoping that the salary cap continues to accelerate and go up. And if the salary cap's going up, that means that the BPI, the basketball-related income, has skyrocketed, which means that they're still making a ton of money. But, if the NBA salary cap hits like 160, 180 million in the next 4 years, because the television contract comes in, it could hit 200 million. And in that case, like players that are making, X amount of dollars right now, they're bargain deals, so you just have to be cautious when you're doing it and hope that it works out. But yeah, I mean, I like John Collins as a player. I think he can be a long-term fixture. And I also think that, Keegan has done enough to show you he can play the three, and he might be able to stick at the three. Kevin Huerter has done enough to make you feel like he can play a bunch of time there too, and you might be able to mask that position, especially if you still have Terrence Davis. Does that free up your money and your sort of your expendable income next offseason to bring back a guy like Terrence Davis?
Definitely a prisoner of the moment. I understand that. I'm not, as long as these vibes are how they are, I'm not messing with
It's not the idea of a move that bothers me. It's the John Collins thing that I just constantly get hung up on. Like, I don't, maybe I'm just not sold on John Collins. Maybe it's the team that he's on. Maybe it's the fit. Maybe it's the fact that he is in trade rumors nonstop for years. It's just,
the guy who's out there that we kind of haven't talked about as well. At least I saw his name floating out there as a PJ Washington.
Yeah.
No, I like PJ Washington.
I do too. But again, you're going to have to give up something in the PJ Washington swap. I think you
can't have the beam. The beam is untradeable. It's got a no trade clause.
Yeah. But was it like 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago that we discussed the potential for maybe Ben Simmons? And you got one look at Ben Simmons and you're like, oh, no, I'm not touching that guy with 10-foot pole. Nope, I'm good.
I actually thought he played good on Tuesday.
Played good.
He played good
last night too.
I think he played good, and you still thought, nope. Like because of the knee, because of the everyone making excuses behind the scenes, and some of his, the murmurs coming out of there, whether like what's happening is real and what's not. I don't like that all that's going on for this kid. Because I really do think he's taken a beating in all this thing. I really like PJ Washington. I think he would be a really nice fit, and I think that that's a team that could still use a Rashawn Holmes, and I think that would make a lot of sense. But PJ Washington doesn't make any money, and they don't have a bunch of extra cap space, so you'd have to work out like it'd be a multiplayer deal. And again, like I don't think you have to give up a first-round pick for a PJ Washington because he's an expiring contract or he's due an extension this summer. I think he'll be a restricted free agent. But at the same time, he's not under contract long-term, and you are going to have to figure out how much he's going to want, how much he's going to get paid, where, a guy like Rashawn Holmes is locked into a very specific deal that would, make a lot of sense for a team like Charlotte. Complicated. I think you could get it done, but the problem is they're going to have to send something else back as well to balance the salaries, and that might be a problem.
I think that one of the many great things about where the Sacramento Kings are is this is all fine conversation, especially given the reports from The Athletic and all of that stuff. There's no reason to believe the Sacramento Kings need to make a move right now. Yeah. No one, of course, is saying this team is perfect. No one is saying this team, oh, it's perfect as it is. Let's ride this thing out. I don't think that's what anyone's saying, but I don't feel like an urgency of, man, we've looked so bad here. Because I'm on the floor. The Kings have looked so bad out here. Yeah. The Kings have looked so bad that they've got to do this. They've got to do that. I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
I'm good. Like, I'm good. The trade deadline is a long way away. Yeah. Let's see what this team continues to look like. They've won games with Harrison Barnes not having the best nights. Mm-hmm. So that kind of that you can use that, James, as a talking point in either direction. Well, if Harrison has a bad game and we win, what's the big deal if we trade him? If Harrison has a marginal performance and we win, what's the big deal if we trade him? So there's probably a lot of different ways that you can go with that. I just think Harrison, Barnes, the person, is very important to this team.
I think so too. Like I've said it for years. Like it's really difficult to trade Harrison Barnes from this team. The only reason you do it is if you don't think you can retain him. That's it. And I mean, eventually,
I'm still not sure that you do it.
Eventually, he's going to age out. But like you can't lose him for nothing because you're close enough to the salary cap that him dropping off and the other salaries accelerating that you have. It's not going to leave you enough to go get another player. Maybe you get a $10 million a year like mid-level exemption player, maybe you get Sasha Vazenkov to come over and, fill up some of the void, but that's not enough. And,
if Harrison went to Monty, or Harrison's people went to Monty right now and said, look, we want to stay here. Does that alleviate any thought you have of trading him? Is it just the short term that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, that to me is totally it. Like,
so,
I mean,
so if they say, hey,
he wants to stay here, but I mean, it's got to be within reason too. I mean,
like if he's like, I want to sign a 2-year extension right now. I want to stay here.
I would probably want the 3. But I mean, what's the offer? I mean, are we talking 3 years, 45, 3 years, 48, like that in itself? Like, okay.
Like, what's he at now? 8?
He's at 18, but he's on a declining scale contract. And this is the last year, but it's down to 18.3. So if you could do like 17, 16, and 15 over the next 3 years, which is, if I'm not mistaken, 48 million, then that would make sense. Like continue the declining scale contract with him, where he's still making a ton of money, and he's a smart guy who's already got his money invested in other things, and he's doing perfectly fine for himself. But that would be a deal where he's on a reasonable contract that at the end of the day is movable if you're the Kings. But again, like everything has to like fall into place and be right. And I need to make sure that this is where he wants to be. And, his play early in the season, I have to at least like pause for a second and say, I'm not 100% sure that this is if he had his choice of where he wanted to be. But it's always going to be if the Kings win. Like he wants to be he's 30. He wants to play for a winner. He played for a winner when he was young, and he wants to get back to it. And I don't blame him. But at the same time, like you got to be good too. He's got to hold up his end of the bargain, because trading a guy who's averaging 16.4 points and 5.7 rebounds and shooting 39% from 3 is a lot easier than trading a guy who's averaging, less than 12 points or right around 12 points and shooting 25.5% from 3. And, they're just different, it's a different value of player that you can go get for him.
Yeah. No, yeah, I completely understand. And, I thought about Harrison's game last night, 16 points, 4 of 7 from the field. I think he had 7 of 8 from the free throw line or whatever. And he's been playing well as of late. And, I thought about this, and I was part of it too. I was on here 4 hours asking, what's wrong with Harrison? What's wrong with Davion? Davion was a game changer last night with his defense. And I thought about some of the things that we also talked about, where we weren't sure if it was a fact of, Davion just not being as good as we thought, or Harrison not being as good as we thought, or was it a situation where these guys had a whole new system that they had to get used to, and it was going to take them 5-6 games to find where they could fit in the system, and also find their roles as this team. And it seems like it's the latter. It seems like, it just took some time to kind of figure out how they were going to go about this whole thing. And both of those guys are starting to settle into roles now with Mike Brown.
Yeah, look, I'll bring this point up. Over his last 5 games, Harrison Barnes is averaging 28.8 minutes per game, 14.8 points, 5.8 rebounds, 2.6 assists, 1.4 steals, and he's shooting 41.2% from 3 and 57.9% from the field. He's quietly recovered in the last 5 games and been really, really good. Like, I think people get, a little bit caught up in, even like how I phrased it there, that, if we talk about, if he's averaging the 16.4 versus the 11.6 or whatever he is right now, that's a big deal. But this Kings team doesn't need him to average 16.4. They really could use him to average around 14 and a half, 15. That's fine, where you at least know you're going to get production out of him. And, he's going to get to the free throw line 4 or 5 times a game, and he's going to hit 2 or 3 threes a game. That's like a pretty simple way to get to the point total that you're looking at. But they need that from him. And but again, they don't need 18 points a game from him. They don't need 16.4, especially with all these other players that they have. I think it's an interesting discussion too. We talked about it at the beginning of the season. Like, who did we think was going to be the third leading scorer, right? And I think it's materializing pretty quickly, but we're still seeing like this competitive race between a guy like Kevin Herter and a guy like Malik Monk. And like, we're going to have this team is going to have a bunch of guys right around 15 points a game. And that just makes them really potent and like really, this team has a lot of upside.